This morning, we're going to talk about race. It's a tough and often controversial topic to discuss, but we need to. When it comes to talking to our children about it, it can be even more difficult. What are the right words we need to say? How do we impress upon our children, no matter someone's race? We'll take it even a step further, right? Say ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation. At the end of the day, we are all human. May 14th's racist rampage certainly shed light on what the lack of knowledge and understanding of all of that can lead to. Two Western New York families were generous enough to let me into their homes and have this conversation regarding race. One family is white, the other is black. As you can imagine, their conversations were very different, but they were also very similar. I learned a lot, and I hope while watching this story, you do too. When you first find out you're becoming a parent, you spend the next 9 months preparing. You dream about that little bundle of joy, what it's going to look like, all the things you cannot wait to teach them. It is a beautiful time. But then reality sets in eventually, and tragedies like the Tops massacre take place. You find yourself as a parent trying to find the right words and time to start or continue that heavy and in some cases uncomfortable conversation on race.
Can unintentionally.
Anthony Armstrong and Shuki Naylor agreed to sit down with me to share their experiences parent to parent. For Armstrong, it's never been just a single talk with his 13 and 9-year-old sons. Instead, it's been a series of lessons that present themselves in day-to-day life.
Also making sure that that questions aren't taboo. It's making sure that we're able to talk about it, and that if there are things that come up they don't understand or they're curious about, they can ask those, and if we don't know the answer, we're also upfront about that.
It offers a family learning experience, but Armstrong says for white parents in particular, the first step is to educate yourself.
And I think I also learned a story growing up in school about race in America that sort of had 5 parts. It was, we had slavery, Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, we had to drink from separate water fountains, MLK made a speech, and now everything's cool, right? It was this very oversimplified version.
Naylor echoes it's extremely important to educate yourself and also make a conscious effort to befriend someone you might otherwise not. Your kids, in turn, will do the same.
Or what happens is you find out that we're more alike than we are different. We all want safety for our children. We all struggle to keep our house clean. You know what I mean? There's always more socks to fold.
Armstrong and his wife also take time to interrupt and identify what they see as segregation, racial discrimination, or inequity in books, movies, TV, and again, reality.
Being willing to stop reading that book for a second and call that out.
And making sure those books and shows are showing forms of multiculturalism.
And making sure that all the stories that our kids hear about people who are black, brown, Latino, etc., aren't all about struggle, right? That they get to see kids being kids.
Not dimming someone's light, as Naylor teaches her 2 boys, 25 and 13.
Now, if and when you encounter someone who decides simply because of the color of your skin that you're bad, what you must do is offer them the opportunity to see good in the world.
Naylor's talk with her eldest son, like Armstrong, was initiated by an event.
He wanted to hang out with some friends, and he did not understand why those friends would never invite him over to their home.
Her son was just 6 years old.
Initially, my thought was to ignore it. Mom might be busy, they have a different family, all of that kind of stuff. And then it became glaring.
Her next step was simple. Keep his light bright.
They don't want to have the fullness of what comes with being in friendship or in a more intimate relationship with you. They're lost.
Never change for anyone and love who you are. That has been a key part of her conversation with her second son, who's on the autism spectrum.
It's a little challenging to find ways for him to be included without him feeling like he's excluded, because he's aware that there are differences between himself and others.
Now, driving was a whole other conversation, and the topic still keeps her up at night.
I don't want to go to sleep until I hear the door turn.
She adds, if you get that gut feeling of being uncomfortable in any conversation, you are doing something right.
Stop saying you don't see color. Stop saying it, because in the winter, I'm 3 shades lighter.
Armstrong says empathy is key, no matter what age you are.
When people of color are talking, listen to their perspectives and experiences, even if they are not lining up with yours. I think we have to be open to questioning sort of some of the assumptions that we have.
Two extremely enlightening conversations, and I wish I could show them both to you, but like I was at like Shuki's house alone for like an hour and a half just chatting with her, so I cannot thank her and Anthony enough for those conversations. Now tomorrow, this is just part one, so tomorrow we're actually going to sit down with a couple child psychologists who dig deeper into this issue about how it can be different for different people, and then provide guidance for parents and guardians who are looking for any answers, because as I learned, our children start seeing the difference in skin color as early as 6 months old. So I was told, be prepared, Grant's almost 3. He could start asking questions any day now.
And that's why I think a lot of parents have the best of intentions when they say what she said there, I don't see color, because they don't want to draw attention to it, thinking that that will be a solution. But no matter how good those intentions are, that actually can end up making it worse by ignoring it.
Because you're hiding the layers of history and education, as you heard from Anthony, that, sometimes we really don't get in school. So that's a whole other aspect of it.
Fascinating. I mean, great conversations, and
they
look
were
forward to part 2 tomorrow for sure.
Today we shared with you the conversations 2 Buffalo parents had with their children regarding race. It was eye-opening, enlightening, and extremely educational, especially for first-time parents like myself. Well, this morning we're going to continue that conversation, this time though with 2 child psychologists. I wanted to get a more in-depth sense of how a child's mind works and share any tips on how to deal with a child being bullied or helping to guide a child who is making choices that might be hurting others.
Shedding light on tough issues is never easy as a parent, nor is sitting down to start that conversation.
Infants as early as 6 months really can begin to detect, sort of racial differences.
Dr. Saurav Sengupta is a psychiatrist at Oshai Children's Hospital and UB. He says kids are sponges, so be prepared to have a conversation as young as 2.
Sometimes it's really just about asking questions of them, helping, yourself as a parent understand how they're viewing the world.
Sengupta says take the lead and start the conversation.
Let's talk about it as, how much melanin people have in their skin, and that if you have more melanin, you usually have darker skin and darker hair.
Then you can ask this question. Should people be treated differently based on the color of their skin? Sengupta says children are interested in fairness and most kids will say no. He says that initiates a space for other conversations. As a father of multiracial children, he has found it's critical to ask them about the media they're watching.
What do you think about this character? What do you think about that? Sometimes in being a little bit curious, we can find out really, I'll be frank, sometimes challenging things about how our kids are already viewing the world.
And if they have those challenging views,
here's another way we can look at it. Here's another action that we can take that'll, get us moving in a better direction and connecting with other people of all different types.
He teaches his children to be upstanders.
How to be a good friend, frankly, to someone who looks different or, is coming from a different cultural background.
And now let's talk about bullying. It is bound to happen, especially in school. This is where Desiree Williams, a school psychologist for Buffalo Public Schools, comes in. She says it starts with an intentional and direct conversation.
They should receive a consequence at home that's followed through to really drive home the idea that that type of behavior is not accepted.
And ask your student where that prejudice may come from. When it comes to racial trauma, Williams says for younger children, focus on the helpers like police or their teachers and emphasize safety for older kids.
And honestly, make sure that you are able to dispel any false information that they may have heard. And also for them, focus on that aspect of safety.
And overall, keep tabs on their well-being and watch for any behavioral changes. For example, excessive sleep, eating less.
Not really spending time with friends like they used to.
Williams says thankfully issues in the classroom regarding race are far and few in between at her school. The issues she's dealing with a lot are relational and stem from outside of the classroom. So how do you manage that?
You're engaged, you are talking to your child, that you are a safe space.
Sengupta says as tough as these conversations may be, get used to being uncomfortable.
These conversations are not an option. for many families. You know, it's just a matter of safety and survival. And for me to make a choice on whether I have these conversations or not, I mean, in some ways that is a form of privilege, but I try to flip around and say, well, then it's really, I think it's our responsibility as parents, make sure that we're having these conversations.
Now for younger children, Sangupta has some books he recommends, like the Brad Meltzer series. He focuses on biographies of historical Black Americans. For middle schoolers, he suggests Rita Williams Garcia's One Crazy Summer, and for older kiddos, John Lewis's graphic novel March. Now Williams actually has a children's book series of her own called Brilliant Brown Babies. You can get your hands on that at many local bookstores across Buffalo, and it is suggested you make reading a family event using these books as an impetus for conversations.